Hey sis, welcome or welcome back to Notes on Black Women. I am the Black Woman essayist and I'm so glad I caught you here today. So listen, one question. How did the world become male-centered? Good question. Do you personally as a woman even think that the world is male-centered? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But to go back to the first question, how did the world become male-centered? I think I found out. Take a listen to this week's video essay and I'll catch you on the other side. Hey sis, I'm actually suffering from a cold at the time of me recording, so if I sound a bit nasally, I do apologise. But anyway, this week, as I've turned my attention to black women and decentring men, a key question came up. Exactly what has been the root cause of all women turning their attention to centering men? What has been, from a historical point of view, the trigger for us? What I found from research is there's a quiet lie most of us have absorbed, that the world has always revolved around men, that men have always been the centre, that God has always been male. Finally, that a woman's life has always found its meaning through love, partnership, and being chosen by a man. History tells a different story. It doesn't support the argument that women are naturally male-centered or that we made this choice consciously for ourselves. It was made for us. History suggests there are four key forces that pushed women towards centering men. The world did not begin male-centered, it became male-centered. It didn't happen all at once, it was built piece by piece with four themes: power, property, religion, and social conditioning. The power of a woman before patriarchy, prehistory. In many prehistoric societies, creation was not imagined as male. Life in creation was understood as something that came from women, from the earth, and from water. God as we know him today via the Christian, Catholic, and Islamic, and all mainstream religions, was nowhere to be seen. Across various parts of the world, before religion, feminine spiritual energy was honoured, sometimes feared, and often revered, but never dismissed. For the black diaspora specifically, we know this to be true from what was uncovered in my recent essay, What If I Told You God Was a Black Woman? And if you are catching this on YouTube, that essay may pop up in the right-hand side of the corner of the screen as I'm talking to you now. If you are on Substack, it will be linked into this direct essay. There was Isis from Egypt, there was the Mamiwata women across many parts of Africa. If we look through the European lens, they too had their own female versions of what we would call a creator or God today. So firstly, land ownership and a woman's place in the world. Over time, as societies changed, so did power. This is when land and property became something that could be owned, controlled, and passed down. Once this happened, everything shifted, mainly for women. Wealth needed to be protected, lineage needed to be certain, most importantly, control, especially over women's bodies, reproduction, and sexuality, became central to maintaining that system, in quotation marks, that the world was heading towards. Women, of course, we know couldn't own land. However, around this time, when agriculture was on the rise, women could certainly be passed around and bartered like land. It's this time in history where we first see the urgency of controlling women's bodies and reproductive duties, much like what we have seen across the USA over the last few years. This period followed the abandonment of female energy being present in spirituality. So instead, it was no longer the norm to view creation as something that was feminine and earth-based at this point in time. Of course, men had to make it seem like a process, procedure, something binding, man's evolution, we could say. So enter the idea of marriage, but not as we know it today. This came after some key law changes. So secondly, legal systems that were based on male centering and obedience. A notable example that I found is the Code of Hammumrabi. I hope I've said his name correctly. So under King Hammumrabi of the first dynasty of Babylon, he made laws around criminal activity, social and economic codes, and of course, marriage. When legal systems entered the institution of marriage, women were formally placed under male authority. First their fathers, then their husbands. What may have once been a cultural thing just accepted as a way of life became official at this point in history. It was written, enforced, binding, legal. This removed any chance of authority or autonomy for women who up to this point had none anyway. The legal system was a way to ensure that this remained the status quo. Consciously or subconsciously on men's part, this could be up for debate. The key fact here is that this happened not for women or on behalf of them, it happened to them. Patriarchy then, at this point, we could argue stopped being a pattern. It became a system, a way of governing the world. This helped to prepare society for the next shift around what marriage should actually be about. So number 3, marriage was never about love. So after we had the legal changes, history tells us that marriage was something completely different to what it is today. Historically, and in my essay, Marriage Was Never Made for Us, Untold History of Who It Serves, and if you are on YouTube, that video may pop up as I'm speaking now. If you're on Substack, it will be linked directly in this essay. The research for this piece in this essay showed just how marriage was viewed when it first came into play. It was a transactional agreement. Women were at the centre of it, along with land, property, and the idea of keeping wealth within a certain bloodline, with the use of women and childbearing, of course. For black women, we were not part of this system, not directly, we couldn't be. Enslavement was our plight. However, even though this was a period where freedom was not ours to have, we were still bartered and sold, as we already know. History shows it was white women who were used to control bodies, to link bloodlines, and to secure wealth, rather than us. Marriage, in this context, was never about love. It was about structure, about ensuring that property, land, and wealth, and of course women, stayed within a very controlled line. 2 lines, to be exact. A production line of suitors for men, for white women, bodies and reproduction used as factory lines, you could say, for more blacks to be sold for profit, is what landed on our enslaved foremothers. Since then, marriage has come a long way. It could be argued, well, that the only reason we marry for love, in quotation marks today, is as this is how it has been sold to women, so that we would be willing to seek this out or see it as something agreeable to be in. Historically, for women, their role in marriage has always been about servitude to men and children, even in this period where marriage really focused on wealth accumulation. Of course, men had to take this one step further. Then came one of the most powerful shifts of all, religion. So women and religion and the male-centering shift and how this happened. In my Women in the Bible series, I started with essays on Ephesians and Colossians. And again, if you're on YouTube, those videos may pop up on the side of the screen as I'm talking now. And later this week, we will have one essay focused on Peter 1 as examples of how religion and the Bible have been used to do 3 things very effectively for centuries. Number 1, keep patriarchy in place. Number 2, introduce male leadership. And number 3, solidify women's second-class citizen status. Harm to women and girls in the name of God, in quotation marks, and religion has also been addressed in my previous essays, clitoridectomy, religion and the control of women's pleasure. Also, how religion stole FGM and made it God's will. If you're on YouTube, they should pop up on the screen as I'm speaking now. This is one of the ways that religion has been used against women, especially black and brown women, where these practices take place across the diaspora, even still today. On the other hand, with the rise of religions such as Christianity and Judaism, God became singular and male, not one divine force among many, instead, the authority above all, the Creator, the voice that defines order, a drastic change from what the Creator was in prehistoric times, as cited earlier. The idea of a creator being feminine energy, earth based, and something that can be respected was completely removed at this point in history. This is where we see practices like astrology, the study of herbs, and more esoteric practices criminalized as witchcraft. And women who dabbled in these practices were then labeled as witches rather than healers. So the question is, how was this shift made? How could this have happened so seamlessly and profoundly that we still hold this belief today? What women's historians have to say? Historians like Gerda Lerner, and I hope I've pronounced her name properly, was a woman's historian, agree that this shift was not just spiritual, it was structural. As she outlines in her work, The Creation of Patriarchy, systems of male dominance were reinforced not only through law and property, but through belief itself, meaning feminine spiritual power didn't just fade, it was reduced, reinterpreted, and then eventually erased. This shows the power of language and belief. These are things that women should really take note of. If history can show that men have been able to convince the world, and most importantly, us, to simply believe, in quotation marks, in their laws, codes, and that goddess is no longer, it is now God, as well as take on his ideas that suppress us, this means that writers like me will never be out of work, especially if women don't push back as a collective. If belief systems can be used to condition women into accepting their place, then modern ideologies that are emerging from the Black manosphere must also be understood as attempts to shape behaviour, expectation, and identity for Black women. The difference, though, is unlike historical systems of patriarchy, those ideas by the Black manosphere, for example, have not been successfully coded into law or widely adapted beyond just Black cultural conversation. So over time, the shift in belief systems towards male dominance, we can clearly see, has shaped how people understood everything: power, leadership, even the structure of the family. By the time we reach the modern world, the system no longer presents itself as just a force. It presents itself as a choice, evolution, or even forward progression. Simply because at this point, we have the organisation of land, laws, religion, that is all centered on male energy, notably white male energy. And now we also have a belief system in society as men first and women second. In our case, it's more like Black women third, as my mother was referred to as a third world woman when she and my dad migrated from the Caribbean to the UK. Number 4, love. So love then must be accounted for. What actually happened? Why did women become so willing to be married, give up their rights, and see this as their place? Most importantly, how did Black women, especially, become so obsessed with the idea that being married before having a child and being religious would solve the Black community's problem with single parents who are mainly women? How did their energy shift from accountability from men who are deadbeat dads or recklessly have children with different women to, you know what, girl, you really should have married him before you had his baby? How did Black men convince some of us that we are nothing with our degrees, good jobs, healthy bank accounts, and education if we're not attached to one of them. So, from the 18th century onwards, influenced by movements like Romanticism from the 1700s to the mid 1800s, marriage began to shift in meaning again. No longer openly framed as an economic or social arrangement as it was rebranded as a personal and emotional decision. Overseen by God, of course. A male has to be part of this official, in quotation marks, status. Because at this point, religion was still speaking very loudly about how one should live and what one should do to please God Himself. And also, remember, Goddess herself was long gone. Women, in particular, were taught via social and societal changes that love was the goal, that being chosen was some kind of success for a woman, that building your life around a man was not an expectation anymore, it should be your feminine desire just because you're a woman. We know that at the time of me writing this in the 21st century, research evidence does not suggest that marriage benefits women more than men. We also know research does not suggest that women are largely happier in marriages compared to when they are not, or they have legally unbound themselves from an ex-husband. In the 21st century, the data will show things like married men living longer and healthier lives than women who are married women experiencing shorter lives and having higher stress levels when married. This is where we are. In the middle of a few centuries of trying to sell, in quotation marks, the idea to women that they should, in the name of love, bind themselves to a man because it's what we want and part of our female nature that would make us happy, to be loved by a man. This is done by appealing to our emotions and marketing the idea that we should desire to be tied to a man in marriage, and that all the negative impact research actually shows that marriage, when entered into with the wrong person, can have on a woman is not that serious. This is not an argument against marriage. Firstly, it's an argument to show women where your desire for marriage can be rooted. In history, in societal norms, in keeping control and using women as pawns for gaining wealth, in appealing to your emotions, in control, in religion, in patriarchy, in very clever marketing after goddess became God. Once this is understood, it's an invitation for all women to ensure that marriage is entered into from a genuine desire from a woman, with a very good match with a man. It shouldn't be entered into in the name of any of the things cited or any of the areas cited throughout this video essay, where we can track back how marriage became enforced on women, the psychological change that came for women, and then how it was heavily promoted to women. Are there happy marriages? Yes. Are there women who are happy in them? Yes, but sadly, not as a majority. Based on what research shows, it's the reverse. Men show up as more looked after and happier in marriage than women. So historians like Stephanie Kuntz, and I hope I've said her name correctly, in her work Marriage: A History, have been able to uncover that the idea of marrying for love is very recent. Also, for most of human history, marriage has had very little to do with romance and love at all. So what we could say then is that the language changed, but the structure did not. Women are still expected to prioritise relationships, men, and obedience to them. Religion is what helps with this. Women are still encouraged to find meaning in their own lives through a partnership with a man. Also, still quietly measured by how close they are to a man. The system didn't disappear, it just softened its language. What was once enforced through law and religion is now enforced through culture, media, and expectation. Also, pressuring women's emotions so that they fixate on finding happiness, in quotation marks, by attaching themselves to a man. For women, this can become to feel normal. Because it feels normal, it feels like love, in quotation marks, and we don't actually question it. But maybe we should. Because the question isn't whether the world has always been male centered. It hasn't. History shows us that. The question is, what would your life look like if it wasn't cis? If your choices weren't shaped around men, subtly or directly, if your sense of purpose didn't come from being wanted, chosen, or partnered, if you were not orbiting anyone hoping that he will pick you, if you are not making certain choices as it's God's will, in quotation marks, if you are not chasing attachment to a black man, even if he has very little to offer, just because the black manosphere won't stop telling you you're nothing without being attached to one of their dusty members. And here I'm talking directly to black women. What if you wanted to decide if you wanted him, if he was good enough, if you wanted to place XYZ on hold to have his children and spend your life following his lead? If there's one key thing to take from this week's essay and one key thing to take from this week's Daily Notes for Black Women, which I have shared on Substack, and what I have uncovered in this essay, it's this. Male centering was built cis, strategically, stone by stone, then handed to us. Once you understand that, you can't overlook it. Thank you for staying with me if you've made it this far into the essay. I will catch you in the next one. Hey sis, so if you made it this far, then thanks for staying with me. So as we can see, the world is quite male-centered, and yes, there is a lot to it. That was probably a lot to take in, and I'm sure there's probably more to it if I was to do more research, but going through the timeline, you can clearly see how it all happened. What does this mean for us though, as black women and women in general? For me, I think this is a big signal that we need to be more open to the idea of decentering men. And before you roll your eyes, before you say, oh my God, why are we going here? It's not in a way that you might have heard about decentering men by hating men. I don't believe that we should hate men at all. And I don't believe that if women want to continue to date them, marry them, have relationships with them, that they shouldn't do that, because that's up to you if you want to do it. But it's how you do it. And when I say decentering men, for me personally, you may have heard me say this before, it's absolutely nothing to do with men. I don't think that decentering them is anything to do with them, and it's everything to do with women. So there will be a video pop up in the corner here, or maybe this side, not sure which one, but it will definitely pop up as I'm speaking now, where I give you my thoughts on what I actually think about decentering men and how we should go about it. And if you enjoy this kind of content, then you might want to join me over on Substack. There is a link in the description box below. Totally free to join, no obligation to upgrade or do anything else. Just come over and see what's going on over there. And if you do enjoy this kind of content in video form, then why not subscribe to the channel? Why not? What have you really got to lose? Subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I will see you here again. And until next time, much love, enjoy your week. I'll catch you in the next video.